Good afternoon, everybody. May I have your attention, please? Good afternoon, and of course, first and foremost, sincere apologies. We're starting a little late as the Honorable Railways Minister, Mr. Prabhu, is delayed in a bit of a meeting. But he is on his way, so perhaps we could take our places and, then we could start as soon as the Minister arrives.
Please continue conversation. I mean, we are awaiting the minister, but we are we can continue the conversation. Yes, please. Good afternoon, everybody. Shri Suresh Prabhuji, Honorable Minister of Railways, Government of India, President Jung from the Seoul Forum of International Affairs, Ambassador Cho from the Embassy of the Republic of Korea to India, who has just joined us just a month ago. So he's relatively new ambassador to India. All our eminent visitors from Seoul, thank you so much for coming and making this long trip to Delhi. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 14th India-Korea Dialogue. India and the Republic of Korea relations have made great strides in recent months. The high point has been Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Seoul in May earlier this year, and the decision to upgrade ties to a special strategic relationship. Indeed, the decision to upgrade bilateral ties reflects the importance India is attaching to engagement with the Republic of Korea. There are many things that are in the joint statement. I won't go over it. One of them is to amend the CEPA by 2016. That could mean upgradation. That could mean allowing greater trading between two countries in areas such as fruits, horticulture, steel, etc. There's also a 9 billion fund that Republic of Korea has agreed to provide as tied credit in infrastructure and smart cities. So there are lots of opportunities on the horizon, and the endeavor of this dialogue, this is the 14th dialogue, the endeavor of this dialogue has been to get all people, all stakeholders on board to discuss the future of this relationship and also embed it in the realities of the current context. So without taking too much time, since the minister is here for a very short time, I warmly welcome all of you to the 14th ICRIER SFIA dialogue. It has been supported by FICCI, KITA, which is the Korea International Trade Association, and Ministry of External Affairs. Once more, can we give the Minister a warm round of applause? And also, thank you so much for coming. And I invite him now for the inaugural remarks.
Excellencies and friends, first of all, my apologies for coming late. As you know, I always come on time. It was such a pressing engagement, that's why I need to leave early. I'm still chairing a meeting, which is, I left it and came here. So sorry about that. It is very coincidentally, I also participated in similar dialogues earlier. So I was part of the same process. I've been to Korea as well. Then we had participated in a meeting which took place in India. So it's very heartening to see that this process is advancing and advancing in the right direction in an accelerated manner. So this is a very welcome development, and I really thank all the participants from both our friends from Korea as well as from India for taking this process forward. As we are seeing a new emerging world in which everybody agrees that Asia will be the future. Now, sometimes one wonders, when you talk about Asia, Asia is such a large country, large continent. So which Asia you're talking about? The most populous part of Asia, which is South Asia, or the most advanced part of Asia, which is East Asia? And if at all there is an opportunity, the opportunity will come because of leveraging both the things. We'll have to leverage the large size of population with the advanced technology and managerial practices and great strides that East Asia has made. So in fact, for the Asia to be really realizing the true potential which everybody is talking about, we need to have partnership between the most advanced part of Asia and the most potentially emerging part of Asia. And there I think there is a great opportunity to collaborate with Korea and India. But if you talk about why Korea and India alone, and why not other countries in South Asia with other countries in East Asia? There are a lot of values which also binds us together. It's not just opportunities. I'll come to opportunities in a bit. But the values. Both of us believe in democracy. Both of us have some difficult neighborhood. And therefore we understand how to live and survive and strive in a always possible hostile atmosphere coming from across the border. We also realize that we have done something which Korea has done, something which is exceptionally commendable. When 50 years ago, 55 years ago, Korea and India had almost a similar per capita GDP. And now, what Korea has been able to do in such a short time is incredibly commendable. And therefore, we really appreciate, and therefore we have a model which can be used and be used very effectively in India. In fact, I was in Korea only recently, and His Excellency, before he took charge and presented his credentials to our president, I had a good opportunity of having dinner with him at our ambassador's house in Seoul. So we realize that huge potential that lies in between two countries. So values bring us together. The potential binds us together. And the ability of working together makes us natural partners. If you talk about any Korean brand, people will wonder whether it's a Korean brand or an Indian brand. Samsung is a Korean brand or Indian brand? We are using it so often that sometimes we feel it is our own brand. So you have become a household brand in India. And normally, any geography you go, any investment that comes from other than your own domestic investors, there are some issues always. But I don't see in India any issue for a Korean company. And therefore, we always feel that there is a great opportunities of working together. And the opportunities are plenty. There is a strategic reason why we should come together, and that we are exploring in a significant way. There are possibilities of different dimensions of strategic reasons, which I'm sure there will be enough number of my good friends and colleagues, and I can see that a lot of strategic minds of India, including my good friend Rajamohan is here, so I think they'll talk about that. Then we have some top diplomats, like my good old friend, Ambassador Hemant Singh, who has served not in Korea, but in the neighborhood of Korea. He was ambassador of India to Japan. And then, of course, the top industrialist, our Rajiv Kaul, is also here, and my friends from MEA is also there. So they'll talk about it. But just broadly, besides strategic, let me come to very good potential on economic issues. I was in Korea. Of course, there was an ASEM conference, I was there, but I had a very good meetings with the ministers and others, and we discovered that in the railway sector alone, Korea could play a significant role. Korea has already advanced a lot in railways. And to tell you very frankly, and this is absolutely a truthful statement, that I've seen some other countries as well, but the type of advancement Korea has done in railway is absolutely mind-boggling. Whether it's high-speed railway or even construction of new networks, it is absolutely fantastic. And you are Railroad Research Institute. Isn't it? That's the name for the institute. It's absolutely superlative. And therefore, I proposed to them, and the Koreans agreed, that we should have a comprehensive agreement to work together in railways. First part, of course, many components. One component is research itself. We have a RDSO in India, which is a research organization for the railways, and your Railroad Research Institute can work together to work and develop new ideas and patterns. One of the limitations of Korea is that, and that's why your companies have gone global, is a small size of domestic market. So even if you develop trains, try to develop new network, you can lay it down only up to a particular level. Going beyond that is not possible. Therefore, India has a huge potential. So all your research can be used in applied manner for commercialization only in a market as big as India. And I don't see any other country in the world which will have the propensity to consume the investment in railways as much as India would in the next few years' time. We all talk about $142 billion in the next 5 years, and probably we need to accelerate it to $300 billion in the following 5 years. And that's not something great. What we are going to put in 5 years has been invested by China every year for the last 30 years. So that's how the Chinese railway has become what it is today. Even the Koreans have invested a lot. So if you don't invest, you'll not be able to modernize. You'll not be able to expand the network. And investment of right kind is important. You should not invest into the old technology. You should not invest something which is still 5 generations old. It's not going to work. So making investments into infrastructure which is next generation from today is the ideal choice. And for that we need proper grounding of research. Therefore the research institute of both the countries should work together to make it happen. We also are thinking of high-speed railways in India. We are also thinking of using the same existing track for accelerating speed. That is something which is more relevant to India. And for that again, we can work together to find out how to make new rolling stocks, how to develop it, and many things we can work on that. One of the things I proposed to them looks like a very trivial idea, but something so relevant to India, is could your research institute, and I was very impressed with them, such a brilliant minds, could they not develop odorless and waterless toilets for India? This looks like a trivial idea, but something which is so important and relevant to India, and which is part of a Prime Minister's campaign for Swachh Bharat, but it is something which will bring in huge spin-off benefit to India in terms of public health, in terms of productivity, in terms of increasing tourism, and many things. And something like this does not require rocket science. Something like this can happen very quickly and can be deployed and can be used in a very effective manner in the shortest possible time. Just imagine, every time an Indian will use a toilet, he'll say the Koreans have given this idea to us. So this will be a great opportunity for Korean government and Korean companies and to work together. So Ambassador, I think you should think about it. I have already brought this topic to the minister and I invited him also. So I'm sure when he comes here, he'll come with a prototype of a toilet. So we need to work on areas like this. The second part is financing part. Now, normally we think that if you're financing a country, you are actually losing something. I would put it the other way around. Look at the interest rates in Korea. Look at the pension funds of Korea. And the amount of money that you generate because of your GDP constantly is export oriented, so you generate a lot of trade surpluses as well as you have current account surpluses. So if you deploy that in India at a very attractive rate, the Koreans will benefit, Indian infrastructure will also benefit. I know you already got something like $10 billion of credit line or something like this for the export credit. But I'm talking about beyond that. This is not linked to export. This is something pure financing of Korean savings for India's infrastructure. That is again a great opportunity that we should work together. And I think there are many areas in defense, as you mentioned, in agriculture, in food processing, and many things. So I think we could really look forward to a very rewarding relationship coming out of this bilateral relationship. And this too will not happen unless we have a very closed door dialogue like this. A dialogue between, not necessarily between the governments alone, but a dialogue between different stakeholders who will actually create an ecosystem which will really take this relationship to a new level. And therefore, I really welcome this. This is the 14th India-Korea dialogue, though that also shows a perseverance, because we are not just let it go. So we realize the importance, and I'm sure as the marriages grow older, we become closer to the spouses. So I think surely 14 dialogue would bring all of us together better, and look forward to working in a much closer way. And I'm sure this relationship will blossom into a lot of benefits going beyond bilateral one. Our regions will benefit too. As we know, some of your neighbors, we are also having very close relationship and dialogues. I'm sure that can also benefit from our bilateral issue, because your neighbors can understand you better through us also. So I think that will also be helpful. So we really look forward to working very closely with you. We have no political issue at all with South Korea. This is one country with whom we have only friendship and nothing else. So I think, therefore, we really look forward to working closely with you, take it forward, and anything that the government can do to promote this relationship, my colleagues here are in MEA, and as well as all of us will definitely make sure that this potential is realized to its true level. So look forward to it. I thank my good friend Rajat for spearheading this dialogue. ICRIAR has been doing a great job promoting economic relationship through this economic diplomacy track too. So I think that has been a very effective tool. And I know the distinguished people who are here from Korea. I really appreciate the time you have devoted to this. I think it's not a time that you are devoting, but you are investing. So I think we are investing into the future relationship. So we look forward to high returns and high dividends, because all investors want dividends from it. Will come in the next few years' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for those very thoughtful remarks, and it sets the tone for the next 2 days. As you will see, the next 2 days we have a very rich program. We have many sessions, and there are some technical sessions. We'll be talking about SEPA, we'll be talking about defense, we'll be talking about shipbuilding, we'll be talking about people to people. So there's a very rich session. Let me also say at this moment that last year when we were in the Conrad Hotel and welcomed by our Korean hosts when we were present at the dialogue, then at that moment, while the dialogue was in progress, the level of this dialogue was raised from a track 2 dialogue to a track 1.5 dialogue. And so we hope that it continues as a track 1.5 dialogue as we go along. As the Minister has said that we are investing in this relationship, and I hope that the next few dialogues will, as has been the case before, come out with joint statements, and particularly after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Seoul and the kind of offer of working together much more closely, our SEPA can be upgraded and our relations can move to a new higher level. And we hope that the ICRIAR SFIA dialogue plays a contributory role in that process and in that effort. Without taking too much more of your time, may I now, it's my absolute pleasure and delight to welcome President Jung, who's been the architect of many of these dialogues from the Seoul Forum of International Affairs, and I welcome him to the podium for his opening remarks. Thank you, President Jung.
This computer is too big. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Maybe I can. Okay, thank you. So we already identified one area for collaboration, which is toilet without water. Director Raja Katria, Minister Prabhu, who left, Ambassador Cho Yeon, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And warm greetings to all participants, distinguished participants, on behalf of the Seoul Forum for International Affairs. I'm very glad we are here today to have the 14th India-Korea dialogue, almost exactly 1 year after we had such a meeting in Seoul. What we want to do in this one and a half day dialogue is first to start taking on what has happened in each other's country and region during the last 12 months and explore ways to upgrade the bilateral relationship between our two countries. As was pointed out, in May this year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Seoul, and two leaders, President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Modi, have agreed, among others, to upgrade the bilateral relationship to the Special Strategic Partnership. This is another important milestone in the relationship between two countries since its formal ties began in 1973. The contents of the Special Strategic Relationship, I think, should be filled in coming months and years. But what it means is the two countries consider each other as an indispensable partner in bilateral, regional, and global affairs. And this strategic dialogue, India-Korea dialogue, almost the only one of such kind between our two countries, is asked to provide the contents of the special strategic partnership. I'm not a specialist on political and security affairs, but even as a layman, I can see that the status of India in global affairs has skyrocketed in recent months with the very active and sometimes ubiquitous activities of Prime Minister Modi. Some pundits are talking about the Indo-Pacific region emerging, and India, with its population, economic, and military power, and the central location in the new Asian century, has become the critical actor in this new era. And I like to underline what Prime Minister Modi is reported to have said recently. India is the only country in the world who can deliver 3 Ds. 3 Ds don't carry too good connotation in Korea, but here 3 Ds, namely democracy, demography, and demand. On the Korean side, President Park Geun-hye is in the 3rd year of her 5-year tenure. During the last few months, she had summit meetings with important leaders surrounding the Korean Peninsula, including Xi Jinping, Barack Obama, and Abe Shinzo. And political analysts in Washington and elsewhere are busy describing South Korea's pivotal and sensitive position among big powers, especially between the US and China. And I look forward to Ambassador Lee Jung-min's talks this evening about this issue. On economic front, President Park is pushing her creative economy agenda and tries to support new startups by establishing some 18 creative economy innovation centers around the country. And each of these 18 centers is a collaboration between the government and one big company for each center, and pooling the resources of the government and the companies to promote new startups and new industries. I'd like to note that Korean economy is entering a very critical period. With the global economy in the 7 consecutive years of recession, the growth rate of world trade has been stagnating, especially since 2012. As you know, historically, Korean economy's main growth engine has been exports, but Korean exports, both in amount and volume, have decreased this year, a very rare phenomenon in Korean economic history. And there are reasons to believe this global trade slowdown is due more to the structural reasons than to the cyclical reasons. And if this is indeed the case, Korea has to reevaluate her economic strategy. And this new economic strategy should be found in the areas of innovation, startups, and entrepreneurship. In this dialogue, we have 3 sessions devoted to economic issues, including India's Make in India initiative, new strategies in old and new industries. And I'd like to suggest we have some concrete discussions on open collaboration between the science and business sectors of 2 economies. Recently, the Dutch Prime Minister visited Seoul, and it was announced that 2 countries are going to establish an international version of the Creative Economy Innovation Center. And I think that can be one model we can have in mind between our collaboration. I believe in the next 10 to 15 years, we will experience one of the most pervasive and disruptive technological changes in recent economic history. And some people are calling this the 4th industrial revolution. And I think India and Korea are in a relatively advantageous position in this new revolution, with a very strong human resource base in science and engineering, and a number of global corporate leaders, such as Samsung, Tata Industries, Infosys, and so forth, in the information communication sectors, as well as medical and other areas. So I look forward to some concrete discussions on the possibility of Korea-India collaboration in innovation and business. I'd like to close my remarks by thanking ICRIA, Director Khatria, and the staff for hosting this wonderful dialogue this year. And also I'd like to thank the Korea Foundation, as well as the supporters on the Indian side for their financial support for this series of dialogues between our 2 institutions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, President Jung, for those insightful remarks. Indeed, we also hope that we are able to work together, especially in the area of technology, innovation, and disruptive technology. May I now request the new ambassador to India, Ambassador Cho, to make his opening guest remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here to join the 14th India-Korea Dialogue. Let me first express my appreciation to you, Mr. Khatria, and your colleagues for an excellent preparation of this conference. Let me also welcome the Korean delegation led by President Jung Gu-hyun of Seoul Forum. I recognize many familiar faces: Professor Kim Jong-seok, Professor Lee Jung-min, Mr. Chang Guk-hyun, and above all, Professor Kim Dal-jung, who taught me in my college days some 40 years ago. I heartily welcome each and every one of you. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Ambassador Lee Jun-gyu, my immediate predecessor. Welcome back to Delhi. Ambassador Lee has achieved so many things that whenever I meet my Indian interlocutors, they say so many good things about Ambassador Lee, so much that I even felt some jealousy on him. Among many of his achievements, I picked up one good catchphrase he made: "Let's make Indians our best friends." Well, assuming that it was also achieved, and assuming that we are now best friends, let me quickly move on to what we can do as best friends. Although it was rather well mentioned by Professor Chung, the first thing that comes to my mind is Special Strategic Partnership Agreement. This is a comprehensive framework that will define the future of our bilateral relationship. Therefore, the task for the 2 governments will be how we can realize the vision, embedded in this agreement. One important element of this agreement is that we have now structured dialogue mechanism. So all that we have to do is harvest and collect some concrete results from these dialogues. This dialogue mechanism, however, should not be limited to high-level government officials. It should be expanded to people-to-people contacts and grassroots meetings so that we can enhance mutual understanding of our two peoples. In this context, I am very glad to report to you that the air service agreement was concluded last month. Because of this new agreement, we will have 19 direct flights between our two countries instead of the existing 6 flights a week. This will, I hope, will boost the connectivity of our two peoples. Well, as it was concluded, right after, I mean, one day after my arrival, I will not claim any credit for that. But if the Indian government extends credit to me, I will not refuse it. The second thing we might think about that we have to look into is economic cooperation and trade and investment. Unfortunately, however, the numbers are very disappointing. India is Asia's 3rd and Korea is the 4th economy. And yet, our bilateral trade is just $18 billion. And Korea's investment in India is meager 4.5, aggregate investment is meager $4.5 billion. This is not the number for best friends. So we have to think about how we can make a quantum jump from here. Fortunately, Prime Minister Modi has put forward a number of good policies, such as Make in India, Digital India, and Smart City, which I think will provide an ample opportunity for Korean business sector. Accordingly, we will share the information and encourage our business sector to focus on India. On the part of the government, as well mentioned by Director Kathuria, we will have to upgrade the SEPA, our free trade agreements, which is now 5 years old. It has, unfortunately, lower level of tariff cuts and a very limited number of liberated sectors. So it cannot be a strong basis for quantum jump. So we will revisit it and upgrade it. The third area I want to touch upon is global strategy. As best friends and as democracies in Asia, we can work together in addressing many global issues such as climate change, maritime security, nuclear security, terrorism, and even the United Nations reform. Among these many important issues, let me raise just one issue, that is UN Security Council reform. It is nothing to do with my government's position and instruction. I am simply taking advantage of this track 2 meeting, not track 1.5 meeting. I understand this forum is free from diplomatic nuances and niceties and even government instructions. So the caveat is, again, I repeat, it has nothing to do with the Korean government's position. It is quite known that India has been endeavoring to reform the Security Council of the United Nations and has been trying to increase the number of permanent members of the Security Council, together with a number of candidate countries. This means if India succeeds, India will become a permanent member of the Security Council, but without veto powers. My question is, Is it fair to India? Considering the size of economy, population, and power, including nuclear power, and democracy above all, and comparing it with the existing P5 and some other candidate countries, is it fair that India becomes a permanent member without veto power? Are you not shortchange it? So my advice or my question is, India might think about what China did back in 1971. At the time, there was a consensus that if the United Nations did not invite China as one of the P5s, with veto power, of course, the United Nations will become irrelevant. So why don't you try it? This is a thorny issue. Again, so it's my own idea, and I simply put forward this idea as food for thought for your meetings. Let me now finish my remarks by quoting Prime Minister Modi. He recently said that diversity is India's beauty, unity is strength. I will also paraphrase this statement for Korea. Unity is Korea's strength. Diversity is our dream. I mean, we can inspire each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Cho, for those very, very insightful remarks. So instead of, there are a couple of firsts in this dialogue. We have two ambassadors that are participating, removed by just a few days. We have a student and a teacher participating in the dialogue. So these two, we are truly, I think, on the cusp of doing something new. And I wish this dialogue all success, and I wish all of you have a very successful dialogue. May I suggest that we don't have a coffee break. We've already kind of lost a few minutes. So we don't have a coffee break. We will seamlessly transition into the next session. So our staff will just change the name cards, and your coffee and tea and biscuits will be served where you are sitting. So please don't go away unless you have to. Take a very, very short break, and we'll seamlessly transition into the next session. Thank you, President Jung. Thank you, Ambassador Cho. And thank you, Minister in absentia, for a wonderful first session.
So we are about to start. So we are about to start the substantive discussions during this dialogue with the first working session on Asian security and India-Korea Special Strategic Partnership. To chair this particular session, we have, of course, the most senior and the distinguished Emeritus Professor Kim Dal-chung. The two speakers in this session are going to be Ambassador Lee and Dr. C. Raja Mohan. And the discussants are Dr. Kim, Mr. Tayal, and Sanjana Joshi. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a rare occasion to chair the first section of the India-Korea dialogue. I would certainly like to join our President Chung Boo-hyun's appreciation in thanking for the Indian organizer for this dialogue, and particularly also thankful for Indian hospitality since our arrival. the first section's theme, as indicated in the program, is India-Korea special strategic relationship and Asia. At the beginning of the section, I would like to start with a very brief remark on 3 points. Number one, during the recent years, we have been alarmed by mounting tensions between China and the United States and between China and some of its neighbors. Consequently, current security trends in Asia signify that we have already entered a very complex, very uncertain geopolitical and strategic phase. The second point, at the summit held in Seoul last May, the leaders of our two countries agreed to elaborate the level of bilateral ties to a special strategic partnership. Two leaders also discussed ways to bolster our cooperation in a wide range of area, particularly including foreign affairs, national security, and defense issues, to take the bilateral ties to a qualitatively higher level. The third point I would like to mention is that both India and South Korea faces very similar challenges and somewhat dilemmas in coping with this very unstable strategic environment in Asia. What are the strategies and initiatives of the major powers and the actions of the middle power like India and Korea, and how are they seeking to promote their national interest in conjunction with the big power libraries? Now, what would be most likely development scenarios of international order in this region, in Asia? What can we do to promote stability in Asia? So with these questions in mind, I would like to invite first two very, very distinguished and prominent speakers. I would like to give our speakers 15 minutes each. And for the interest of time, I'm not going to introduce in detail about our speakers. Our first speaker, Lee Jung-min, Professor, Yonsei University, and South Korea's Ambassador for National Security Affairs. And the second speaker is C. Raja Mohan, a head of strategic studies and distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundations. And also we have three designated discussants. Kim Chang-soo on the extreme left, a senior research fellow at the Center for Security and Strategy of the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis. My very left, Ambassador Skan Tae-yeol, currently visiting professor, Delhi University. As you all know, he's a former Indian ambassador to Korea. And Sanjana Joshi, on the extreme right, senior consultant, ICREA. Without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Lee.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kim. Like Ambassador Cho, I'm also Professor Kim Dae-jung's former student. So I'm not sure whether this is a good trend or not, but it's a real honor to be speaking in front of my mentor and my former teacher. I'll spend exactly about 15 minutes or so, and of course, although I wear a government hat, all of my personal remarks in this conference will be in my private capacity. The basic story that I'd like to tell all of my Indian friends, which you are all very familiar with, is that if you look at Asia in the 21st century, my personal view is that all of the good things are in Asia, but so are all the bad things. And so all the opportunities and all the solutions are here within our vast region, which we call Asia. And so the whole idea that Asia's rise is immutable, that it will go on forever, I don't think it's really true. And so I've just completed a book on this subject, which is coming out next year from the Carnegie Endowment. So if you look at the key shift, which all of us know, the world is shifting towards Asia, but Asia is not yet ruling the world. And so the key issue is, what can India and Korea do in this transformational stage? And for reasons that are unknown to me, I've been asked by my peers and my senior mentors at the Seoul Forum to give another speech tonight, so I don't want to repeat myself, because I want to sound at least halfway original this evening. If you look at this map, and you see over the last 500 years, the rise of China is nothing new. She is coming back to where she was 300-400 years ago. And obviously, India's place in this region, obviously, is also nothing new. And if you look at the orange graph and the red graph, that's both India and China's share of global GDP over the last 500 years. And the blue bar is the US. And I believe firmly that America will continue to play a critical role, but over the future, it will be run primarily by three powers: the US, China, and India. And it is in that sense that both Asia's opportunities and as well as challenges really rests on India's shoulders. So there are two Asias we are all familiar with. Most of us in this room are concerned about the top half, or the good story, the good side of Asia's rise. Whereas people like myself and Dr. Kim Chang-soo and my very good friend Raja Mohan are more concerned about the bottom half of Asia, the security dilemmas that this region faces. And if you look at this, for me, the biggest startling change historically over the last 100 years is that for the first time in the history of the world, China, India, and Japan have all arisen at the same time. This has never happened before in the history of the world and Asia. So the key issue is, how do you manage relations with China and Japan? And from our perspective, as we try to, we cannot, of course, avoid closer ties with China, but how can we diversify our foreign policy? In my personal view, India is the obvious choice. One of the things that really alarms me personally, and I'm pretty sure Raja shares the same view, Asia is the department store of security threats. You look at every single major security threat in the world. Of course, we have ISIS. I just came back from a meeting in Bahrain. They're very concerned about the rise of ISIS or ISIL. You have instability in Syria, the ongoing refugee crisis, obviously. But if you look at all of the core critical threats from failed states, and I think we can be more frank here, the two failed states that we are both coping with across our borders are Pakistan and North Korea. And they both have nuclear weapons. And they both are run by armies. So as one very noted American scholar said, Pakistan and North Korea are armies pretending to be countries. But if you look at, for example, sea lanes, if you look at geopolitical rivalries, if you look at nuclear issues, every single one of these, they have a Chinese footprint. You cannot avoid discussing Asian security without taking into consideration the Chinese factor. And for us and for you, we have lived next to China for more than 2,000 years, so this is something that will stick with us for a very long time. In terms of intra-regional security threats, again, China plays a critical role. I don't think there's a single South Korean who is concerned about the rise of Indian military power. There is not a single South Korean who is concerned about India projecting power beyond the Indian Ocean. But I can guarantee you there are many Koreans who may not be so vocal, but they're deeply concerned about China's growing military footprints. So if you look at the world's top defense spenders, unsurprisingly, they're all in Asia. Now, Mr. Putin has done a great favor to all of the arms industries in the world because he has awakened our European friends. But our European friends, with all due respect, are never going to increase defense spending above 2%. And so almost all of the defense spending in this region will come from China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, parenthetically, of course, Australia, and of course, in this part of the world, India and Pakistan. If you look at this, there's been a very big change in the world. And for the first time in 2013, defense spending in Asia crisscrossed and was higher than Europe's. And I believe that this trend will continue over the next 10, 15 years. And this is why I believe that my president and your prime minister singled out defense and security as one real key area of collaboration in the years ahead. Let me just deal briefly with what I believe are China's concerns. The red belt is the Asia that we are living in right now in this region. This is where you have India and Pakistan and Afghanistan and all the other stans, and all the way up to Turkey. And that is the energy belt of Asia, but it is also various fault lines lies in this part of Asia. Whereas the Asia that we come from is primarily the blue part of Asia that is more politically stable, quote unquote, and that has more economies that are more export oriented. But my question is this: unless the red side of Asia becomes more prosperous and stable, the blue side of Asia will suffer. And this is why I believe over the longer term, Korea must play a central role in bolstering development and prosperity and stability in this part of Asia. As for China, all of you are aware of what China is doing. I don't want to belabor the point, but they are now at a point where China can project power well beyond its shores. And the person who is most responsible for making sure that China is now going out into the sea, in my personal view, is Mikhail Gorbachev. Because once Gorbachev was able to diffuse tensions with China, what did China do? She immediately withdrew all her forces across the Sino-Russian border. And China also faced a critical test in 1979. She was beaten by Vietnam in the Vietnamese border war. Those two lessons left a deep scar in the Chinese psychology. And I think Deng Xiaoping and all the other leaders who have come after him have said we will never lose another war with Vietnam, for example, and China will continue to project power. So in the next 20, 30 years, she will be able to project power not only in the East China Sea, in the South China Sea, and over the longer term, in the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. So from our perspective, China in 2013 unilaterally declared the East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone, which the Americans and the Japanese don't recognize, and neither do we. And we are hoping that the Chinese will not declare a similar maritime zone or an air zone in the South China Sea. But this is one area, as Professor Kim Dae-jung mentioned, the Chinese are becoming very aggressive in. If you read Chinese military doctrine, they have 3 layers of defense, coastal and maritime, and including 3rd layer of defense. And all of these have a growing maritime footprint. And this is why India is deeply concerned about China's naval surge, as we are. And this is one other rationale why I believe India and Korea should cooperate. I don't want to go into all the details, but every single issue that you see on this slide, from the Taiwan Strait to cyber warfare to the South China Sea, these are all issues that also impinge upon Indian security. Now, just briefly, I want to conclude with some remarks on the Korean situation and what we can do with India. My personal view is that you see 2 diametrically different Koreas. And over the next 5, 10 years, I believe that there will be significant political developments in North Korea. I have no idea whether Kim Jong-un is a closet reformer. They have been saying two things about North Korea for the last 30 years, and both are untrue. The first prognosis is North Korea will collapse, but that has not come about. The second prognosis is North Korea will reform. That hasn't come about either. So North Korea hasn't collapsed, hasn't reformed, so she is basically muddling through. But I think this muddling through strategy will not outlive Kim Jong-un. In other words, I think Kim Jong-un will face a very, very different path than compared to his father. What I see happening on the Korean Peninsula, in short, is that we are shifting away from linear, conventional scenarios to non-linear, asymmetrical scenarios. And this is where I think our security assets are going to be more focused on. Now, finally, going beyond the political platitudes, what does the special strategic partnership really mean from a defense perspective and a security perspective? As I said, if you look around the Korean Peninsula, every single major power that we have interacted with, whether we liked it or not, it's been a very tough relationship. With the Japanese, who are former colonial powers, with the Americans, who are our greatest strategic asset and ally. On the other hand, we also saw what the Americans did in Vietnam. And so if you look at China, of course, we have no choice but to live with China. But if you look at poll after poll after poll, Koreans have a very divided opinion on what the future role of China does. And of course, Russia is an important economic partner, but to be really frank, Russia is really not on the radar screen of most Korean thinkers. So if you want to diversify Korea, again, as I said, the natural partner for us beyond Southeast Asia is India. And in particular, because of one word, magnitude. The magnitude of India in economic, political, and military terms simply cannot be ignored. So if you look at why we have shared interests, the minister outlined some of them. For me, the most important is this. Every step we take, whether on intelligence or national security or defense, both sides gain and none lose. And this is the only relationship that I can think about in Asia where there is zero political fallout in terms of what we can do bilaterally. And that serves, of course, our purposes. And our foreign minister has been trying to level up South Korea's so-called middle power diplomacy. But I believe that the real diversification can happen with deepening ties with India. So if you look at defense collaboration, this is going to be my last slide. As I was researching for this particular talk,